So today I'm going to be covering 4 things that you need to check if you're driving your Ford Ranger on corrugated or rough roads. Starting with number 1, which is going to be under the bonnet. So number 1, and probably the most important thing that you can check on your Ford Ranger, is going to be this front wiring loom over here. So essentially what happens is this wiring loom rubs on the front timing cover, and over time it'll wear through the plastic there and start splitting your wires if you're not quick enough to pick it up. I used to run a rubber hose here along that top of that timing cover and sort of glue it down to stop the rubbing from happening. But I found over time the rubber hose would just eventually fall off with all the bouncing and that. So what I do now to prevent that is actually lift up this whole wiring loom off its seating spot where it sits there and just put it in front like that and let it sit in front. So you'll see that there's a little, I think it's like a 10mm bolt that sticks up from the timing cover, and if you just sort of put it in front there and sit it like that, it'll be fine. So now you'll see that this big fat plastic here is actually sitting on top of the timing cover, and essentially this loom here that rubs through is no longer touching. So that's pretty thick plastic there. I haven't had any dramas with it sitting like this. It's been perfectly fine. So number 2 is going to be your upper control arm, bolt and nut. So what I found over time is this nut here on the upper control arm, especially if you're running aftermarket control arms, comes loose. It's happened to me a couple of times. You probably could just replace the nut to a brand new one, because obviously the nylon ring there wears out over time if you're constantly taking it on and off. But yeah, it comes loose, and then obviously the upper control arm starts having play in it. So what I've actually done is I've used another nut on the end of the original nut to just tighten it up and tighten those two together, and that has essentially solved the problem for me. So there's enough thread there to thread on another nut as long as it's the same sort of thread pitch. So quite easy fix. Just put another nut on there, lock them both together, and that'll prevent your upper control arm from coming loose. So number 3 is going to be on this side, which is your starter motor terminals. And essentially your starter motor terminals are located right here, just above your oil filter housing. And what happens is you'll notice that the actual engine is cranking a lot slower, and it sort of feels like it's got a flat battery, but it actually doesn't. What's happened is the terminals, which are located here, have actually vibrated loose. I had this happen on mine. When I tightened them up, they were all good to go. Haven't had a problem since, but it is something that I have come across. And number 4, which is going to be the last one, is going to be underneath the car. So I'll climb under there. So this one's going to apply to the manual transmission only, and it's your gear shifter linkage. So if you follow the tail shaft forward, I'll try and zoom in on this one. You can actually see that there is a 10mm nut. So it's a 10mm nut. I think it's a 10mm or an 8mm. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that comes loose. And what happens is when it comes loose, you'll lose first, third, and fifth, or if it comes loose on the other side, you'll lose 2nd, 4th, and 6th gear. So what the idea is here, if it does come out, you got to replace the bolt and Loctite it in. It's been sitting in there without any problems now for at least 50,000 kilometers. So it can happen on both sides. There's one of these bolts on the left and the right. So make sure you check both of them. So I want to finish off by saying this is mostly for Rangers that do a lot of off-road use and that have high mileage. If you use yours in the city and, you know, occasional off-road and take it off-road here and there, you really probably shouldn't experience any of these problems, but it is something that you should keep an eye on.